Is Wednesday, October 4th. It is 10:08 a.m. I appreciate y'all being here in Nacogdoches and online for our latest installment of the Region I Water Planning Group meeting. I officially call it to order. And Kelly, if you would, you want to take care of the, David's our official invocation and.
Yeah, you have to, and then we'll do the pledge like that.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, let's pray. Father, we give you thanks for your blessings to us today. Thank you for the gift of life and health and liberty and ability for us to represent our neighbors in East Texas today as we consider these items before us. Pray that you give us wisdom and good judgment in all this. And we thank you for the rain that you give us for sustaining our lives and our businesses. And we ask your blessings on our state and its leadership and also our nation and its leadership. So Lord, we ask that your blessings be on us today as we travel back to our homes. And we thank you for your goodness to us. In Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of
America,
and to the republic for which it
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under
under
God.
God,
with liberty and justice for all.
liberty and justice.
play ball. Anybody who's not speaking right now, can you make sure your microphones are red? Folks online, keep yourselves muted until you need to speak. For the members that are online, make sure you're visible at all times, because for it to be official, you have to be seen, and we also need to be able to hear you. So, and be patient with us. Cheryl has you guys on her PC back there, and if you need to get our attention to chime in, you can wave. You can also turn your mic on and whatnot. We'll eventually get to you. Your patience is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, notice of meeting number 3, it has been properly noticed. Number 4, roll call and determination of quorum. Cheryl.
David Alders.
Here.
Chris Davis. Chris Davis?
Here.
Wave.
Here.
Kate Dietz is not here. Roger Fussell, he sent Kelly as his alternate. I still have a question whether that's legal. David Gorsuch, not here. Scott Hall.
Here.
Kelly Holcomb.
Here.
Fred Jackson.
Here.
John Martin.
Yes, ma'am.
Matthew McBroom.
Here.
John McFarland.
Here.
Matthew Metallier.
Here.
David Montaigne.
Here. Here.
Oh, I didn't have him. You're online? Okay. Monty Shank.
Here.
Mike Snyder.
Here.
Rob Starr.
Here.
Terry Stelly.
Here.
Emily Whitworth is not, and Chris Weisinger is not.
It's 15.
So
Blank.
that's 14.
Thank you, Cheryl. Now that we have our quorum, we can roll right on. Anybody here want to provide any public comments? No. Moving right along. Item number 6, consideration and approval of the minutes of the June 21st, 2003 meeting. I will entertain a motion. Please, if you do it online and in person, identify yourself so we can keep track of who's making the motions, please.
So moved, Rob Starr.
Thank you, Rob. Do we have a second?
Second, Kelly Holcomb.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments, questions, discussion? All in favor say aye.
Ah.
Any opposed? Hearing none, passed unanimously. Item number 7, reports from the city of Nacogdoches. Ms. Cheryl, what do you have for us today?
I don't have anything specific. Everything's working. That
Okay.
is a good thing.
Good, good.
The only other thing I have actually will be Kelly will do that during the finance report.
Next item, 8, reports from adjoining regions activity. Region C, Mr. Montaigne, any updates?
Nothing significant to report.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McFarland.
Region D's meeting started 15 minutes ago. I think it's going well.
You hope it is.
No indication otherwise.
Mr. Hall, Region H.
No report.
Interregional liaison, Mr. Holcomb.
Thank you, sir. The Interregional Planning Council met on August the 15th. We are in review mode with regard to the last Interregional Council report. We are working to identify the data that we're wanting to include in the new report, and we're prepping a draft report as we speak. There's been a lot of discussion about the items that were not implemented in the original report that was done in 2022. And our next meeting is planned for November 30th. Those meetings are public as well. I would encourage anyone who is interested in that to go to the Water Development Board's website, Water Planning tab, Interregional Planning Council, and you can see the date for the next proposed meetings.
Great. Thank you, sir. Next item, number 9, reports from standing committees. Executive Committee, that would be me. Executive Committee met earlier today to discuss the nominations for, or the appointees for our nominations committee, and we'll touch base on that a little bit later, assuming we get a vote on our bylaws and get those passed. That's all I have. Finance Committee, Mr. Holcomb.
Thank you, sir. The Finance Committee met this morning, and we have items under Agenda Item 10 that we'll bring to the planning group for consideration at that time.
Thank you. Bylaws Committee, Mr. Alders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will have a report later, which I think is agenda item 11. We'll mention that the bylaws, which contain significant number of changes, some of which are substantial and some of which are just kind of clerical, are in the documents that Cheryl sent links to. And it's the Word document, I think, at the end of that list of documents. So I'll give everybody a little advance warning that you'll need access to that document when we get there. We had a few changes that we made in our committee meeting today. Really only one, which is substantive. So we will report out on that work later in the agenda.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Okay, if anybody in the room here needs a copy of those, let us know if you don't have a computer with you, and Cheryl will pass them out. Okay, thanks, John.
Next item 9D, Technical Committee. Scott Hall did not meet, correct?
We met earlier this summer
That's right.
about
That's right.
conference call.
We approved the municipal numbers, correct?
Correct.
And final,
That's right.
Nominations Committee.
We did not meet.
Hopefully we can get you busy after today with a full committee. Or during today, yes.
How about here in a few minutes?
Item 10, consideration and approval of contract amendments. This is what Cheryl was referring to and Kelly was referring to earlier. I'll hand it off to you, Kelly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will cover all 4 items, A, B, C, and D, because it's one big, long discussion about contracts between the City of Nacogdoches and the Water Development Board and the City of Nacogdoches and the City of Nacogdoches and the consulting team. So first, I want to thank Cheryl for digging into this. We're a little bit behind. 3, item A, B, and C all have to do with contract changes because of budget. and because of budget authorization from the Water Development Board. Technically, agenda item A, we are one behind in authorizing a contract amendment between the City of Nacogdoches and the consulting team. We have already, the planning group has already approved the contract amendment between the Water Development Board and the City of Nacogdoches, giving us the money to fund amendment number 2 with the consulting team. We've just not done the contract amendment with the consulting team to ratify that action and get them the money. They're not in a bind for cash, as I understand it, so it's not a pay issue. It is more of an administrative contract issue that we need to get caught up on. And then item B and item C is an additional amendment from the Water Development Board to the City of Nacogdoches to finish funding all of round 6. And then item C is a contract amendment between the City of Nacogdoches and the consulting team, which is Plummer and his crew, and their crew, to fully fund the remainder of the round 6 planning activities. So it's a little bit of juggling back and forth, mentally speaking, but when the transition between Stacy retiring and Cheryl picking this up, there were some delays and a little lag time in there, and it, again, Cheryl's had to kind of pick up some
Learning
things,
curve.
and huge learning curve for her. So I, again, thank her for doing this. This gets us caught up on all the contracts between us and the Water Development Board and us and the planning, or the Nacogdoches and the planning team itself. Correct, correct. Yeah, by the Water Development Board in August of this year. So this takes us all the way through the end of the planning cycle. And then item number D, 10D, is a, yeah, so you have in your packets that is online, item number 10, contracts. And if you look at that document, why can't I get it now? Thank you. It's on screen as well, correct. So what the Water Development Board did in the agenda item, or excuse me, in August when they approved their, to fully fund this, as part of this process, they created the categories that you see there for contractor, parentheses, political subdivision, for salaries and wages. This used to be a funded item back in the day. I think the last time that I could detect it, it was in round 3 planning. It wasn't called out as a line item for the political subdivision like it is now. And I'm sure the call has gone out to the Water Development Board that political subdivisions are struggling for money. And maybe that's a poor choice of words, but it's getting more expensive. And they need to be able to recoup more of their direct costs associated with the administration of the grant and the whole water planning activities as a whole. So in prep for this, and as part of putting the pieces together correctly, we had a conference call with the consulting team, with the political subdivision, Cheryl and Bridget, were the ones on the call, where we figured this out. So with this new allocation, which is item 10C, amendment number 2 between the Water Development Board and the city, they're giving the city $227,000 in grant. And we're wanting to take $60,000 of that $227,000 and allocate that to funding for salaries and wages for the City of Nacogdoches, our political sub. We've had that discussion with Bridget and their team, and they're good with it. That it fully funds their budget, and we think that it's a solid proposal. They can live with, we can live with it, and we need to get our political subdivision some money for direct reimbursement of salaries.
FYI, there is a lot of behind-the-scenes work that Cheryl takes care of, a lot.
So one of the requirements associated with the second page of this item, do you have the second page, whoever's controlling the, oh, keep on going, it's item D. Yeah, the eligibility listing stuff. Okay. For those of you, yeah, you may not have this, but if you downloaded the packet off the website and item 10D, that PDF, the second page of that PDF, has a listing of administrative salaries and wages. As part of our diversion, and I say diversion, allocation of $60,000 in funds for salaries and wages, the planning group is required, that's the document, thank you. The planning group is required to approve the salaries and wages of the individuals that we're going to be seeking reimbursement for. And as we understand it, we can modify this list as we go through time. We can add to, take away as we further develop that budget. But in order for the city of Nacogdoches to get reimbursement for hours already spent up to and including this meeting, this is additionally what we're approving. So your item 10D is the budget allocation that you're seeing on the first tab, as well as the salaries and wages for which we're going to be seeking reimbursement.
This is limited to $5,000 per meeting.
Per meeting. And that's $60,000 for the entire budget planning cycle for round 6 planning. And I'll be happy to entertain any questions. I know that did a lot of mental, gymnastics there. I apologize for that. But the good news is this makes everybody whole, and in terms of the finances to conduct our planning activities.
Do we need a motion on each one of those items?
Yes, sir, we do.
Do you have a recommendation on those motions?
I'll make a motion that we approve item 10A. Let me get there so I can read it correctly. Authorizing the city of Nacogdoches to execute and amendment number 2 with the technical consultant team in the amount of $483,361.
Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second it. Rob Starr.
You were beat, Rob. We got Terry Stelly first. Sorry.
Not a problem.
Any discussion? Questions? Anybody online?
No, you don't know.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Number B.
Should we mention that Michelle Moss is in from the Water Development Board substituting for Lane?
We can.
Well, I didn't turn my mic on.
FYI, anybody who has question, Lan is not with us today. Michelle Moss is that correct? Foss. So,
Michelle Faust, yes, I'm here.
thank you very much. And if we have questions, which we inevitably do for you guys, thank you for being here.
Quite welcome. Happy to be here.
Thank you. 10B, Mr. Holcomb.
Make a motion to authorize the city of Nacogdoches to negotiate and execute amendment number 2 with the Water Development Board in the amount of $227,480.
Second.
Second.
Give that to Matt McBroom, got in first on that. We'll give Rob the third one, just because he's been trying so hard. And I'm sure
It's
there's
fine.
a little bit of a delay there. Any discussion on B? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. 10C. Motion to approve, do we have a motion to approve the city of Nacogdoches to negotiate and execute amendment number 3 to the technical consultant team contract for $167,480 to increase the total project committed funds for the 2026 Region I Water Plan?
So moved.
Motion by Rob Starr. Second?
Second, Fred Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Another unanimous vote. Thank you very much. And lastly, Do we have a motion to discuss, and do we have a motion to approve the amendment providing for the city of Nacogdoches, our political subdivision, to be reimbursed for salary and wage expenses as outlined in that table and that rate sheet?
So moved.
Second, Chris Davis.
That was Rob for the motion?
Yes.
Chris was the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, hopefully that takes care of the contract stuff for a few years, hopefully. Moving along, we are at item number 11, consideration and approval of updates to the bylaws. We kind of started this at our last meeting, so those, we saw a version of this earlier this year. David has been working on it pretty heartily with a lot of input, so Cheryl has an extra copy if anybody needs a hard copy here.
Yeah.
But David, why don't you run through everything you think we need to review today?
Yeah. This is, obviously, if you look at the changes that are tracked on this document, there are a lot of changes. It's the first kind of major revamp of the bylaws in some time, and I think maybe the most, the most dramatic revision of the bylaws, but most of these are not terribly substantive. And I'm not going to go through all the changes. I will go through the changes, the one significant change we made this morning in our committee meeting, but we'll get to that in due time. I would say that it's largely, most of the color is a result of taking out duplicative language or kind of mind-numbing references to the Texas Administrative Code and those sorts of things. For example, the Regional Water Planning Area, Article 1, Section 2, gives you an idea of, you know, how we tried to make it a little bit more user-friendly, reader-friendly, in identifying the counties that we encompass in whole or in part. But again, that was in the draft that was sent out by Cheryl. So stop me if there are any comments or questions you have about any of the changes that are made, that were made in the draft that you have in hand. I'm going to concentrate on the items that we changed subsequent to the emailing of that document. So I want to drop on down to Article 5. Voting membership. The one significant change there, because we've had a little bit of a debate over the past week or so about the interest groups and the number of members that are assigned to these various interest groups on the planning group. We did go ahead and decide that we would delineate those and list them out under voting membership composition, Section 1 of Article 5. And so I'll just read exactly what we changed there. The last sentence, which would follow, plus any additional voting members duly appointed by the ETRWPG to ensure adequate representation of the interests comprising the planning area, period. The new sentence, which you do not have in front of you, is the interest groups represented on the ETRWPG and the number of members representing each as of the date of the adoption of these bylaws are listed as listed below, period. And then we have the listing, which is agriculture 2, counties 2, electric power 1, environmental 1, groundwater management areas 2, industries 2, municipalities 2, public 2, river authorities 4, small business 2, water districts 1, and water utilities 1. We don't have any conflict. That is actually a list of all the groups. The only addition from the beginning of the planning group really was groundwater management areas. I shouldn't say the only addition since the beginning of the group, because we did in previous years fold an other category into these listed categories. So we've made minor changes over the years, but it really helps us to have these set out specifically so that there's no doubt about what our interest groups are and how many representatives we have in each. The most recent addition to this group was the GMA area, groundwater management areas, that are represented by John and John. John M. and John M., to be specific.
Clears that up.
Clears that up a lot, yeah. So, any question about that one? I'll stop since that one is new to everybody. We'll make sure it doesn't, there's no change there. It's just listing what we have.
If anybody would like to chime in online on that or here, feel free to. That was, so we spent a lot of time going back. Kelly had some older documents that helped us work through some stuff and figure out the exact lineup. Oh,
Yeah.
and they do have the list?
Okay,
yeah,
good.
The list is included with the documents online and that were emailed yesterday. So you've got that list in front of you. And it's just putting the interest groups in the bylaw.
Yeah, and we do have 12 with the addition of the GMA, 12 interest groups, so we made that change in the first sentence of section 3. So I'm gonna move on down, and because our meeting schedule is a bit different than it's been in eras past, we now have flexibility not to have quarterly meetings. And so if we're only during parts of the planning period, if we only have a couple of meetings per year, we thought absentees and attendance and that sort of thing under section 4 needed to be expanded from 12 to 24 months. So that's in that first paragraph of section 4. Moving on down, we made Code of Conduct under section 5 a bit more efficient. We didn't change anything or drop anything out. We just put that number 4 up in number 3. I don't see anything substantive as we move on down to Article 6, non-voting membership. There was a lot there that we did not need and didn't reflect current practice, and so we really just folded everything into section 1, which is mandatory members. And then, well, one paragraph, you can see how many paragraphs we deleted. Again, that's non-voting members, which really are, they come to us as assigned by the entities that are designated as non-voting interest groups. Then on down to discretionary members, we didn't really change anything there except some grammatical areas. Designated alternates, Article 7 is one that we had already made back some time ago, several meetings ago, maybe even a year or two ago. So really no change from that. Here's a substantive change that we talked about last meeting, or last time we considered the bylaws, and that was folding our executive committee membership from 7 to 5 members. So we took out second vice chair and assistant secretary. Again, those haven't seemed over the 20 plus years of the group to be necessary officer positions. We inserted in various places administrative officer in addition to secretary or chair for notification and communication areas. So moving on down to duties of each officer, we took out those paragraphs that related to second vice chair and assistant secretary. Nominating committee, we did specify there that the current chair well, actually, we really didn't change anything there. And correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I don't show that we changed anything. We have 5 voting members of the nominating committee who are not officers or not members, really, of the ETRWPG Executive Committee.
Correct.
I think it'd be better actually to strike officers and put members,
Okay.
since we don't want to confuse that with the officers or the at-large members, all of which are part of the executive committee. So we'll put members there instead of officers. I'm doing that on the fly here.
Not officers?
It's going to read, yeah, who are not members of the ETRWPG Executive Committee, which would include at-large and officers. All right. I think that's, you can see that under regular meetings, Article 9, Section 2, we did indicate that schedule of meetings can be adjusted to less than quarterly meetings. And then I think the only other really significant change, and maybe I've already passed through it, is, well, I lost my train of thought there. I'm trying to remember. Oh, yes, the election of officers. This is probably the most substantive change in the bylaws, is that the election of officers would be on the 5-year planning calendar, not annually. Because we meet once or twice a year, it doesn't really make sense to change out officers on that schedule, and the planning cycle being kind of a comprehensive calendar for us, it makes sense to have continuity, we think. Their executive committee and the bylaws committee agree on that. But again, that's a substantive change. I just make sure everybody's aware of it. I'd say it does behoove us when we make an officer change, especially when we elect a chairman, to make sure that we elect a chairman that we're comfortable with and has shown, leadership and that we feel like we can live with for a whole planning cycle. So it puts the onus on us to make sure that we elect a high quality chairman. And I think we have that now, but.
I can vouch for quality. Higher otherwise is on you. And why that changes for the voting is Article 8, Section 1.
Okay, Article 8, Section 1. Yep, good deal.
You're saying bad is equality, is it?
So, any questions? That's kind of my report. I know it's lengthy and there are a lot of changes there, but again, I think I've outlined the truly substantive changes so that I don't want anybody to be blindsided here. I would say that we want to reserve, and in the motion that we make momentarily, in fact, I'll go ahead and make the motion. I guess we can discuss it afterwards. Want to reserve the right to make pagination changes, and you'll notice that I tried to reformat the table of contents so that it accurately reflects what's below. But if there's a discrepancy between the table of contents and category headings, we want to reserve the right to make those kind of clerical changes in the motion, or any grammatical changes or words that are left out, like articles and that sort of adverbs, that sort of thing. Yeah.
So what we're looking for is a motion.
Yes.
To adopt.
And I'd be happy to make that motion as committee chair, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, I move that we adopt the amended bylaws as presented, and that we, as part of that motion, reserve the freedom, the right to make grammatical changes or minor edits like pagination or add left out words that are not substantive.
And including the changes that were discussed here today.
Absolutely, including the changes that we discussed today, which are again primarily the listing of the interest groups and the number of members for each.
Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Monty Shank got the second in. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Anybody online have any questions? Comments otherwise? There was a lot of work that went into this baby, so thank you, David.
Yeah, absolutely. John, thanks to you and Cheryl and also Roger Fussell for all those above named and others who weighed in.
Hearing nobody wanting discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Awesome. None opposed. Unanimous. I thought I had one other item on here to go ahead and move the, to approve the nominations committee. I missed this, huh? Oh, well, guess we don't have work for Monty set out today. Moving along, item 12, report from consulting team with discussion and possible action by Regional Water Planning Group. Miss Bridget?
Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you again for having us. So today, I guess our last few meetings, you've seen a lot of results being reported out to you, and a lot of numbers and data. This one is more action-based, less reporting out of information. It's getting us set up for the next data-heavy pieces that are coming up as a region. So bear with us. There's a lot of things that are going to be thrown at you and a lot of discussion and approvals, hopefully. So let's get going. So today's discussion, I put pretty much action next to anything that's going to require a motion and discussion, which is pretty much everything. So we'll be going over just a little bit of the schedule, and then we're going to be seeking action in some form for major water providers, the infeasible water strategy methodologies, results, and recommendations, hydrologic variance request for surface water supplies, the water management strategy evaluation methodology, and notice to proceed on task 5B. All of those are required to have approval by the Regional Water Planning Group, by Texas Water Development Board. And then we'll finish off talking about what's coming up ahead, the pieces that need to be included in the big technical memorandum that's due in March, and what that means in terms of our next 1 or 2 meetings that might be needed prior to that deadline. So there's a copy of this that was sent to you guys and is also on the meeting website. It's the same schedule that Texas Water Development Board puts out. We just moved the bar. So I know this is small, but it is in the meeting documents just for reference every time. But the main part where I'm zooming in on here, so our short-term schedule in October of 2023, this month, Texas Water Development Board, the Beebs doubled there, but we'll be adopting projections, hopefully, for our region. We've received word back that there were a few minor changes that they had, but we've discussed it with the group, and it was, they generally accepted all of the proposed changes that we put forward. So congratulations as a group, and thank you all for your help over the last 6 months of really bearing with us while we went into the detail of all of those and all of that information. Moving ahead, you are here, October through December 2023. Basically everything we're presenting today, that is a list of why we need approval. These are all the things. Once it's approved, we're going to proceed forward with all those things I just listed on the last slide. Because October through March, we'll be preparing the technical memorandum and then reporting that out to you guys, probably in an interim progress meeting and then a final approval meeting for that TM. So moving ahead, so our first item up is for major water providers. So I believe this is for Jordan, right? Yep. So actually I think this is partly me. So definitions for major water providers. So we need to have approval on what is defined as a major water provider for the region. From the last round of planning, we had selected the definition as recommending for any major water providers be listed as any of those that provide more than 5,000 acre-feet per year, non-aggregated groups, and owns their own groundwater wells or has direct surface rights. At the very bottom, it has what the exact terminology is from the Texas Administrative Code, but basically the gist of it is that pretty much whatever you guys determine as your major water providers, it can be however you define it. So this is the definition from last time. That results in the next slide. This is the list of major water providers as defined by that particular definition from last time. So we wanted to provide this to see if there was any other additional discussion in terms of definition, if there are any conflicts with the way the group wants to define major water providers, or if there's anybody on this list that either you feel needs to be added from your region, or any of these that should not be considered as a major water provider.
Do y'all have a suggestion or any suggested changes or see a need to change?
We do not. So the motion here is, actually it's right here. So we want to propose and recommend approval of the definition and list of major water providers as listed on here.
And this is no change from the last time we adopted this, right?
Actually, I think it's the third planning cycle with no change.
Just for context, these major water providers we highlight and have individual sections in the plan showing what their supplies are, their demands, and what their strategies are in chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5. So just like individually highlight them along with the county reports in the regional water plan.
Do we want to do motions as we go along, or do you want to hit them all at the end?
If I'd prefer if we could try to knock them out one at a time. I do have a dedicated slide for each motion if we could.
Okay. Discussion approved. Anybody have any questions, want any input on any of this? Does anybody think that number should change up or down? I know we got a couple of mid-sized cities, I don't know, that are interested in being included. Lumberton Mud, City of Jasper would probably come in at about 2,500 acre feet. Anybody online have any input? Anybody have any recommendation other than what we've done the past 2 cycles? I'll entertain a motion then.
John, just
Go ahead.
just to jump on what you said, I know we're pumping anywhere from 6 to 800 million a year. Easily. And if we have months like we had last month, we pumped 100 million last month. So I'm not sure where the 5,000 acre feet falls, what that, is it like?
I'm guessing that would be about 2,500 acre feet for 800,000.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, 800 million.
Yeah, 5,000 acre feet per year is essentially equivalent to around 1.6 billion
So,
Oh, okay, yeah.
gallons.
Yeah,
per
so
year.
we're well short of that.
okay. Well, if everybody's good with what we've done last year, I'll entertain a motion to go ahead and utilize the same definition.
Motion to approve the definition and the list of major water providers.
That was Mr. Kelly Holcomb and David Alders. Get this written down at the right place, so I need to.
You got a few seconds.
Anybody have any comments before we go ahead and make a vote on it, or take a vote on it? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We've got one item knocked down, moving along.
Who's the motion and second on that?
Kelly and David.
Okay, next item up, the Texas Water Development Board requires that the Regional Water Planning Group review, receive public comment, and approve the infeasible water strategy methodology. And then based on that methodology, we have some preliminary findings for consideration. So this is directly from the Texas Water Development Board. So we are here in this red box here where the Regional Water Planning Group is presenting the results of analysis at a public meeting. And this is the part that needs to have approval. All regional water planning groups must present methodology for identifying potentially feasible strategies for the plan at the meeting, and it requires a 14-day notice. So that's why some of the information for this meeting came out earlier than you guys are used to on that 7-day. so that is the reason for that coming out. And then the next major meeting will be, all of those findings will get rolled into the technical memorandum, which will include the actual list of the infeasible strategies based on the methodology we're presenting today. That will also require a 14-day notice and public comment period. And then anything that is identified as infeasible would need to go through the amendment process to amend the previous plan. So based on that, so this is a new requirement for this planning cycle. That you guys did not have to do this previously. It is listed as Task 4B, Identification of Infeasible Water Management Strategies in the 2021 Regional Water Plan, required by Senate Bill 1511. And so, like I said, the methodology and results need to be presented at a public meeting. You are here. And the analysis will be in the TM due March 4th. And in addition, it will be in the initial plan and the final plan. So basically the main purpose of the infeasible strategy, you're looking at the 2021 strategies in there, and you want to focus on ones that are requiring a new permit or involving some sort of construction, anything that has a very long lead time, that were shown to be online by 2020 or no later than January 5th of 2023. If things have not been done, if there has not been a new permit filed, or if there has been no movement or approval of funds for this kind of construction, then the likelihood of it happening in the next coming years, it's not going to, it's an infeasible strategy for the timeline as it was outlined in 2021. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but the timing might be different than what was put in the 2021 plan, which means that the 2021 plan would need to be amended. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. So those that are near term with lengthy permitting and construction need to be considered, such as, in our case, the main one is any new major reservoirs. You want to make sure that if you've got a major reservoir planned, it's not going to magically go in the ground in 5 years if you haven't done anything about it in the past 5 years. And so there's just a list on here that you're welcome to read through. Most of these do not apply to this area, but this is just a list of the kinds of ones they're really targeting with this bill. But generally what they're trying to say is anything that's going to require significant resources, aka money, significant time to implement any of these. Those are the ones that it's really trying to target. So we go through an initial screening process. So we get a big database list from Texas Water Development Board, and it goes through an initial screening process before we boil it down to the ones that really need to be considered for infeasible strategy evaluation. So the first question is, does the strategy require construction or permitting? Is it recommended to be online in 2020? Or in this case, our deadline was January 2023. Also, another big one, is there an identifiable sponsor? So, for example, anything that was identified for like non-municipal livestock, for example, that does not have an exact sponsor that we can sit there and pinpoint and reach out to. If there is an obvious one, then we can reach out to those, but some of those did not have an obvious sponsor, somebody that's spearheading that effort, and thus it does not need to be considered for the infeasible strategy. And then lastly, is that strategy a major project type? Specifically, again, we're trying to target reservoirs and other such projects. So if it's yes to any of those move on to the next step and are retained for further evaluation. The idea is here that anything that's going to be online in 2040 or later, there's time to implement those, so that automatically gets rid of a good chunk of the ones that were in that list. This is just the near-term ones that need a lot of effort. And so the next step in the screening process, is there any new information that we can get from these sponsors or on the project that may preclude construction of the reservoir? If yes, it moves on and we still need to look at it. In item number 3, is the reservoir recommended to be online prior to 2050? Again, the actual, like the major reservoirs, that one's going to take a little bit more legwork. So if it needs to be before 2050, then retain that for further evaluation as well. Was the strategy or project implemented by January of 2023? If it was not, it goes on to the screening. So you see we're slowly kind of whittling down from this big list and getting smaller and smaller and funneling down to the main ones we need to look at. Is the strategy or project in the correct planning decade? So if no, I mean, if yes, you can go to, has the sponsor taken any actions towards it? If the sponsor has had, approved some funding at one of their board or council meetings, have they started down that process in some provable way? If yes, they have, then it's still feasible, they're working towards it. If not, it stays as infeasible, and those are the ones that we need to evaluate. In addition, on number 7, if the planning decade was incorrect, will adjusting the planning decade fix this? If it's still happening, but maybe it just didn't happen yet, that would still require some change to the 2021 plan, but it's still considered a feasible option. Whereas if even correcting the decade won't fix that, then it needs to be thoroughly vetted as an infeasible strategy. So any questions on that funneled screening process first? Okay. So that screening process is the part, and we'll have a couple more slides before we get to the actual action, but that is the actionable portion of, do you guys agree with that process? Does it make sense to you? And are there any other major changes to that? Based on this process, so there was a spreadsheet format obtained from Texas Water Development Board, which listed off ones that needed to be assessed for infeasibility. We went through that list and kind of worked through some of the details and saw why some of them were screened out, and looked a little bit deeper into which ones needed to be looked at as infeasible. So based on, there were several different sources here. So Texas Water Development Board identified 2021 water management strategy projects. Out of that, 11 of them were conservation projects. So demand management typically will be screened out. There's not any sizable dollar effort that's associated with that. One was a non-municipal project and did not have an identifiable sponsor. It was also screened out. There were 5 projects with online decades after 2020. So we didn't need to worry about those quite yet, so those were screened out. And so that left, in that particular category, there were 3 projects that needed to be reviewed for infeasibility. And then for select projects online after 2020, major reservoirs, there's 1 project that needed to be evaluated, so that would be Lake Columbia on there. And then then other related supply, there were 5 non-municipal projects in there that were screened out, leaving 4 projects that needed to be reviewed for infeasibility. So after that initial screening process, so that was applying the full, funneled screening process to what you guys have as strategies from the 2021 plan in your area. That boiled it down at first glance to 7 strategies listed on this screen. But upon further review and also reaching out to several members of Texas Water Development Board, including LAN, items 4, 6, and 7, those all required purchase of water on an existing contract. And so it was just making that amount larger. The infrastructure's already in place. There's already a current application and process for that. It would just be asking for more. And so that did not, because it was not a new permit, it was not a new water rights, and there was no additional infrastructure needed, those 3 items all fell off of the list based on that funneling process. So, so that leaves the ones on here, and then we have already talked to, we already received word back from Kelly on Lake Columbia. So that stays on there, there's no issues there. And then, Jordan, do you want to update on the other 3?
Yeah, so the Athens project requires no infrastructure. Essentially, that's just a fish hatchery that's owned by Texas Parks and Wildlife, where they're withdrawing water from Lake Athens and using it and putting 90 to even more than 100% back in. So that's just kind of an ongoing thing. It's not shown as a firm supply, but so we have to show it as a strategy in regional water planning terms. So that project is an ongoing thing. The 2 next projects, the Neches Run River of Lake Palestine and the Beaumont West Regional Reservoir, there's been affirmative steps taken towards those. There's been funding allocated to them, so those are considered feasible based off the criteria.
Okay. So based on that process, again, we're going to go into more detail into the technical memorandum and the actual list of what's considered feasible and infeasible. That part does not have to be approved at this meeting. It's the methodology. But based on that methodology, it does not appear at the moment that there are any that are listed as infeasible strategies for the region, which is fantastic news because that means we do not have to go through the amendment process for any of these.
Awesome.
So, again, those will be officially approved at our next meeting, but the process itself is what is needed here. So for item 12C, we are recommending and seeking action on the infeasible water strategy methodologies, results, and recommendations as presented in this section of the meeting.
So could you back up a few slides? You got down to 1, 2, 3, and 5 were identified infeasible, and then you did something affirmative to take them off that list. Go back into your decision matrix for how we got to that point and then how we took it off. Where did they, at what step did they come off? I mean, you got all the way to putting them on the list as what they made it to through 5, and then at 6, you said the sponsor's taking affirmative action, so they're feasible at that point?
Yes.
Is that where you are?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's correct. So they passed that initial filter through those initial steps, and once it gets to that step 6, there's been affirmative action taken, so they're feasible.
So the whole point of the filter is to get all of that whole list down to which ones do we actually need to reach out to the sponsor. And so that's where this list, we individually reached out to the sponsors for every one of these to get additional information on.
So they were not deemed infeasible at that point. At that point, they were just still
Correct. So I guess really I
in
need
the
to correct.
decision matrix.
Correct. I need to correct the title of this. It's really identified potentially infeasible strategies. None of them ended up being infeasible.
Okay.
So, Matt from Tiger, can you go back to the matrix slide again, the little funnel? And I may just be missing the point here, but when we get to number 7.
Could y'all speak into a microphone?
Monty, can you?
All right, we're back to the screening process, funnel looking diagram thing. So I have a question, and I may be missing the point here, but when you go to number 7, and if we correct by going the yes route to feasible, do we not then go back to 6? To see if the sponsor is taking affirmative action? Would that-
It depends on the decade it goes out to. If it goes out far enough, then we don't even have to look at it. So the question is, when would it actually happen? If it goes out far enough, then you're back at step 1, where is it going to happen prior to 2040? If you push out the decade and it says, okay, we're gonna do it out in 2050, we don't care if the sponsor did any affirmative action yet or not, because they won't need to do affirmative steps towards it.
Does that make sense?
Not in my simple brain, but.
Yeah, if there's a deficiency in water supply in the year 2050 or 2060, and one of these projects is designed to meet, or management strategies is designed to meet that need in 2060, it doesn't have to be done now.
Okay.
So therefore, moving the decade.
So the decade correction is correcting the information that it is something in the future that we don't need to do.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's not correcting the decade and rolling that date back to push us back to step 1?
Correcting the decade would be, we were trying to have it done by the year, 2020.
Okay.
And we didn't make it. We think it's gonna be 2030, so if we push the decade back to 2030.
Okay, fair enough.
You just push the timeline out,
Okay,
yeah, it's still feasible, because it's meeting a strategy in 2030, not 2020.
Right,
Okay.
it would pretty much take us back before, like back to number 1. If it wasn't recommended to be online in 2020, if the answer is no, then it just stays in there and you don't have to evaluate it anymore.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so one question there for that is, if it's supposed to be online in the 2020 decade, there's some deadline that it has to come online for before it's kicked to 2030. What is that date?
January 5th, 2023, I think was the deadline.
So if it was supposed to be online in the 2020 decade, you had until the beginning of 23 to have it online.
That's
Otherwise,
correct.
otherwise it should just kick back to the 2030 decade or later.
I don't think you can just kick it back. You have to take action to deem it infeasible for 2023 and then make an amendment to the past plan, if I'm correct, and change the date.
You're correct.
Change the date to 2030 decadal period in an amended previous water plan.
John McFarland, I think in your decision tree here, what you need is a yes or no. Do we, at this point, if it's not feasible, do we continue by increasing the decade? Are we through? And that's not clear in the decision tree. At what point do we say we need to extend the timeline?
Just planning the cycle correct this.
Well, and I guess there's an importance there between, is it a completely infeasible project or is it infeasible to have it online in the 2020 decade? You know, I mean, I think if you say the 4 or 5 items that were still on the list that you needed affirmative action from the sponsor, well, I don't know that those projects are online today as we are past January of 2023. They're still feasible projects. They're just not going to be online before the January of 23 because we're already past that.
Yes, but other affirmative actions have been taken to make it that meet the state's threshold of it still being feasible, correct?
That's what I'm saying. It's still a feasible project. It's just not feasible to have it online in 2020. So what are you aiming for? Is this a determination of it's eventually feasible, or is it going to be feasible for the 2020 decade? Because if it's not done yet, it's not done. Doesn't mean it's not infeasible. Not feasible. Too many negatives here. Excuse me.
It would seem like the first project, the Athens reuse, if that's already in progress, that one would not be an infeasible water management strategy. But it looks like if you had 2020 online decades for the other 3, you need to take a good hard look at whether or not you need to adjust the planning decade for that. And also to clarify, you do not need to vote on the screening process. Essentially, when you are reviewing and approving the technical memorandum, you are accepting what you are considering infeasible water management strategies.
Making sense, Scott? Or enough sense to move along?
It doesn't make any sense to me either, but
Doesn't?
I don't.
See, to me,
What if you
it
had a strategy that was going to come online in 2029? That's in the 2020 decade.
But the Water Development Board has a couple of check boxes that if they've checked with either the sponsor or some action's been taken to show that it's moving along.
By January 1, 2023.
Yes. It's
Kelly,
feasibility.
I think in the previous cycle when we completed the last plan, the development board made sure that in order to show that a project was online by 2020 in the 2021 plan, we had to speak with the sponsor, and it was supposed to be online by January of 2023. So like the example you just gave, where if it was 2029, that would have rolled to the 2030 online decade, even though it was technically online in 2020 decade. That was just they gave us that January 2023 deadline. So anything that's shown as 2020 in the plan was supposed to be online by 2023.
Right. So I think that's where I was headed. That at this point, if it's not online, it needs to slide back to 2030 decade of being online. The 2020's passed.
Correct.
You may still have sponsors taking affirmative action, but it did not come online before January of '23. So those other three things on there may need to just go ahead and be kicked to the 2030 online decade.
Well, do we know what their online projections are for those other projects? Are they 2020?
Well, we had to look at the ones that were in 2020 and in 2030, so some of them they might say 2030. It doesn't necessarily, the list that's on there isn't all just 2021. Some of them are 2030 as well. But
Well, it's
if
not a
it
very
has
long list,
lead
go back
time-
to the list.
Isn't the basic concept of either keeping them or removing them, trying to protect funds from projects that are delayed? So they're not really being removed from the list, but it's freeing up money for other projects that are ready to come online. Isn't that the basic concept of?
I'm not thinking that far into it.
Well, the
I
basic.
think you're probably along the right lines here, Terry.
Sir?
I think you're on the right track there. I mean, it's.
You don't lose the project, it never goes away. It's just not ready for funding yet. And those funds are freed up for projects that are coming online, that are ready, and contracts are going to be let. And that frees that money up to fund those projects while the other ones still are on the list for later funding.
Well, that begs the next question then, are these projects being removed from the Round 6 plan if they're deemed infeasible?
That was the last plan, right?
Sir?
That was the last plan or the current plan?
No, the current
Is that
plan. We're
pretty
having to remove them
close?
from the current plan.
If there's still projects that
If-
want to be included, the dates will have to change on.
Yes.
Correct. You would adjust the planning decade. If you have a reservoir project and you've had some issues regarding land purchases, you've got some contracts that have already been established, and you've got Army Corps of Engineers permitting in progress, but it's not going to be finished in the 2020 decade. It might be 2031 instead of 2028.
So
Then
this
you would
plan
push
or
the
previous
decade out.
plan, they can be deemed.
Well, I think it's even more than that. It's
Still
not
feasible.
online in 2028. If it didn't come online by January of '23, you need to push it to the 2030 decade.
Correct.
So either you kill it in the 20,
And so, yeah, we will be updating that as
And
part of
then the next
sixth
planning cycle, then it comes back
We'll be updating
for
the
evaluation
decades
for
coordination
another
with
water
the
strategy
major water
plan
providers and
in the
water
next water
users.
cycle. And that becomes part of the
I
funding
guess that item
options for
7
that.
there,
That's-
Water Development Board is giving us flexibility to say, say a project was, when we had approved the plan last time, it was around 2019, 2020. And at the time, sponsors had told us that these projects would be implemented before 2023. But, things change, it's very dynamic. And even though some of those timelines may be pushed back to say 2028, 2029, as of now, they're giving us the flexibility to say those are still considered feasible and you don't need to go back and retroactively amend the 2021 plan. I guess is kind of what that step 7 means, my interpretation.
so it's an either-or scenario.
Yeah.
If you want to keep it and change the decade, keep it in the plan, you've got to go back and amend the 21 plan and the 22 state water plan. Or the sponsor can say, we're out.
I think that's correct.
Everybody's gently shaking their head yes, but I get no real confirmation that that's the case.
Yeah, Kelly, that's correct.
Okay. That being said, does anybody, Scott, you seem to have some thoughts maybe on that methodology and that screening process?
No, I think it flags the point that if you got to that last little bit and the sponsor's taking affirmative action, it's the yes should roll. I guess the decision should not be from 5 to 6 or 7. It should be from 6 to 7. So if it's a yes at 6 at this point is not feasible. A yes at 6 rolls to 7 of will adjusting it make it possible. Does that make sense?
Sarah, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. If I can make a clarification. Can y'all hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
go
yes.
ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Lee. I'm with the Water Development Board, manager of the Regional Water Planning Program. So just wanted to kind of jump in and help clarify some of the things here. So for number 7 on the flow chart that you all have right now, if adjusting the online decade will correct an infeasibility, you still need to consider that infeasible. And then you would have to amend the 2021 plan to move the online decade out. So essentially number 7 would be infeasible, yes or no. We didn't say that if adjusting the online decade would make it feasible, then you can just say it's feasible. It means that first you say it's infeasible in the current decade, and then you have to amend the plan if you've determined that to make it feasible by pushing it out an online decade. So it doesn't become feasible until you've done the plan amendment. So I wanted to clarify that point. And then I just also wanted to make a clarification on kind of the process. Michelle kind of mentioned you don't have to be taking action necessarily on the process, but you obviously are welcome to. However, something to keep in mind is you need to be having a presentation on what your results are, which is what, I understood as to be y'all doing today, but it kind of seems like y'all may still be conducting the analysis after this meeting. But just to note from the other items on your agenda, you do need to be presenting the results of this at the same meeting where you're also taking action on item E on your agenda. And then action on item E needs to occur before item F. So just keep that in mind depending on what you're doing here and other items on your agenda and whether those may need to be tabled to the next meeting for action. And I can answer any questions on that if that was confusing.
So Sarah, let me ask you this. If the strategy was not online, if the project was not online by January of 2023, is it even relevant if the sponsor's taking affirmative actions towards implementation?
So we have updated so that as well is coming from old guidance, and we provided updated guidance on this back in January. And we've recently incorporated, and we provided that by email. We've recently incorporated that into our contract exhibits. So you need to be looking at this holistically. And if the sponsor has taken affirmative action, you can consider that feasible, even though it's not necessarily online by that implementation decade. The implementation decade from that January 1st or 5th date, 2023, was coming from our plan development guidance from last cycle. And that was an additional layer that we kind of put on this when we first wrote guidance on this new task. But the statute behind this requirement for the infeasibility analysis is not looking necessarily at that 2023 date. So you're looking at it more holistically. Has the sponsor taken action? Is it still on track to be implemented by the online decade? So if, not necessarily tied to the 2023 date, but if it was supposed to be implemented by then and it hasn't, you need to be looking at it in terms of affirmative action's been taken and it's still on track to be developed by the timeline. So it does kind of matter as well in terms of the timing. Not sure that helped or not.
So if you have a sponsor that's working towards a project and there's affirmative steps taken, you can say it's still feasible. You may need to look at updating when it's coming online, but that doesn't automatically kick it to the infeasible just because it didn't make the January 5th, 2023 cutoff date.
If it's not online to be implemented by when it was shown in the plan, then even if they've taken affirmative action, you still might need to consider that infeasible. And if the online decade needs moving out, you would need to do a plan amendment to move the online decade.
So what you're saying is we need to deem it infeasible, amend the previous plan, make changes to make it feasible and move forward with the plan.
Correct. So the statutory language behind it is looking at whether the sponsor has taken affirmative action in order to implement the project by the online decade as shown in the plan. So you're looking at both the affirmative action and the online decade. So that's why we had that, we'll revising the online decade kind of correct the infeasibility. But yes, you would still consider that potentially infeasible if you are having to move the online decade to make it feasible.
So I guess a clean definition of what is the online decade. The project is up and running by a date certain to be counted as 2020, and that date was January 5th, 2023. So
right.
anything
Yep.
coming online after that is online by the 2030 decade.
Right. So our decades are kind of a snapshot up until that decade. So 2030, I think Cody maybe mentioned this or someone, 2030 online decade would be anything kind of 2023 to 2029. The 2040 decade would be anything 2031 to 2039. So it's kind of looking at the years previous to what we call like the online decade.
Okay.
So this is Kelly. I've got one more follow-on question to that. So if a project sponsor was at stage 7 and they realized that, oh, I do want to continue with this project and it's going to require a water plan update, the 2021 water plan update, that update would have to be completed by the time we were required to send the technical memo to the Water Development Board, correct?
So what you'll be doing for this is your results will be presented from this analysis, and then the list of any infeasible strategies or projects to identify will be included in your technical memorandum. And at the meeting where you approve the technical memorandum, you'll also be taking action to proceed with the amendment process. So whether it be a minor amendment determination, or if we know it'll be a major reservoir or a major amendment, which would be in the case of it being a major reservoir, you'll be taking action to proceed with the amendment process when you take action to approve your technical memorandum, and your consultants will be working, essentially right after the tech memo. They need to be preparing amendment materials and submitting that to us as soon as possible. You will also need to take action in the spring to adopt the amendment to the 2021 plan if you end up identifying anything that is infeasible, because the adopted regional water plan amendments are due to our agency in early June. So there's a quick turnaround in when you'll be taking action on them with the tech memo and then getting the amendments done.
So I just one comment for the board that would y'all please take under consideration is there is a certain negative connotation with the regional planning groups finding a project infeasible. I mean, there's a public statement there of these projects are going to be infeasible. And as hard as Kelly has worked to get Lake Columbia pushed through, a public finding that's an infeasible project, so it's kind of a public relations nightmare for him. And I think the same thing would go on for any of these projects, but that one in particular has been a project for this planning group since the beginning, and to come out and say, oh, this is infeasible, even if it's just changing the decade to fix it, that's a bad public statement to go out and make. And it's not the intent to say this is unfeasible, kill it. It's just, it's not coming online at this time. We need to push it back a decade.
Right.
A year or two.
And so we have required this task because it came from legislation implemented by Senator Perry. So just as a reminder, you all have Chapter 8 of your plans where you make policy recommendations. That could be a recommendation in there regarding how you feel about the legislation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Scott, and to follow on with on his comment, it won't come to bear now. The backlash, the negative side effects of this won't be recognized today. It'll be when you go out for a public comment on a federal permit where you've got everybody and their dogs that come out of the woodwork and say, hey, this project was deemed infeasible by the planning group back in, the year, 2023. And that notation will be forever documented, because the way I see this decision matrix and the way I understand it is, if a project is deemed unfeasible or infeasible, it's going to be deemed infeasible, period, and then you're going to have to make it feasible through a second process.
May I offer a suggestion in this war of semantics that
Quick question,
in
Keith.
reporting,
Can you
if-
identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry, Fred Jackson.
Thanks, Fred.
In your reporting, if we say the project is only infeasible for completion in the 2020 decade, perhaps that might ameliorate some of the bad press.
Fortunately, if I'm understanding what our consultants were saying earlier, all of our projects were deemed feasible, so we don't have to go the infeasible route on anything. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what we were discussing over here.
Yes, so we're,
As much as we're having a discussion on the details, sorry, yes, that's what we were having a discussion over here on the side, is as much as we're going into the details on these, I think it's more of a, I mean, it's still something that we need to understand, but ours are feasible according to this, so it may not matter.
Well, it may not matter today, but this decision that we make
Correct, so
today,
it's
this
still a
decision
valuable
matrix
decision, yes.
will be cemented in our plan for probably
Correct.
the next several cycles, just like our WUG definitions were. So
Correct.
it's important to get it right here so we don't have to deal with this later on and look at unintended consequences.
Correct.
I have a question, if I could. Stephen Lang, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. I'm just a third-party observer at this point. Is there any way to change the definition of what feasible and infeasible means there? Because infeasible really just means it's being deferred due to time, or it's attainable or unattainable within the planning period of time. Because that seems to be what we're hung up with here, and I guarantee you my constituency, y'all's constituency, when they see that, they're gonna say the same thing. Oh, well, this has been deemed infeasible, you can't ever build that reservoir, and we're gonna fight to keep it from building the reservoir, when that's really not the case here. Is there any way to change the semantics other than, I think someone attempted to answer that earlier, saying that this is in legislation and that verbiage has to be changed?
exactly, it's legislative. I don't think we can do much in the way of that. Sarah, you want to chime in on that?
Yes, so the definition of infeasible for this task comes from Senate Bill 1511 from Senator Perry a couple of sessions ago. So that's why
It is what it is.
we're using the terminology we are and how this is done. It's because it's coming from the Texas Water Code.
And again, the whole point of that whole process was to take projects out of the water plan that were fake or weren't going to be built ever, or it was a past project that was now, been deemed to not be feasible, and and it does tie to funding. But the general process was, we looked up and went, hey, all these projects are in there, and the decades have passed by which it was supposed to be online. We need to clean this plan up so that we can look at our plan, state water plan, and use it, and really use it as a guidebook to get to whatever benchmarks we're trying to hit.
I think we've,
Beat this dead horse to death.
well said. We are looking at two different potential action items related to this. First, to approve the methodology, correct? Is that what we need to do?
To my understanding, yes, but I think Michelle was saying something different.
No, you do not need to approve the actual methodology.
But we can if we wanted to.
Yes, you certainly can.
But if you were worried about the methodology, by not codifying it, that leaves us the flexibility down the road. Okay.
Yes.
Minor technical differences there, but.
What do we have to take action on with regards to these? Their actual process that they went through to get to the projects that are deemed all feasible? Did I say that correctly? Didn't make sense. Yeah.
Well,
The consultants went through a list, thinned them down, and deemed everything to be feasible. Do we need to take action on that specifically? The process that they
methodologies they use to
utilized-
get there, right?
Well, the process, well, the fact that they came up with those responses.
If
Well, if we
the
go with the
consultants are
methodology we're adopting-
absolutely sure, then yes, you can vote. However, as part of the technical memorandum process, you will be identifying the infeasible water management strategies that you are intending to put in your regional water plan. And you'll be identifying the feasible water management strategies and adopting those. So by the action of approving your technical memorandum, you will be approving what you're considering to be your infeasible water management strategies. Is that clear?
As mud.
So technically, we don't have
And-
to approve anything today. Approving the technical memorandum will be the approval.
Right, and can I jump in as well here, Kelly, to help clarify? So the way our rules are written on this, and I've realized that they're a bit confusing, so we'll be trying to clarify this next cycle a little bit better in our rules. But the way that our rules are written regarding this is, so you're later in the agenda, you're also presenting your process for how you're going to evaluate potentially feasible strategies in your 2026 plan. And that does require an action to approve that process. However, our rules then say at the same meeting where that occurs, you also have to present the results of the infeasible review task from the 2021 plans. So today, you only have to, at minimum, present the results from this infeasible task. And then, as Michelle mentioned, the list will be included in your technical memorandum. So if you do identify any, that list will be in your technical memorandum, and then they get approved with the approval of your technical memorandum. If you do not end up having any identified strategies, your technical memorandum will state that the region did not identify any infeasible strategies. So it'll be captured there in terms of the documentation. So today, at minimum, you're presenting the results. If you all would like to take action to further document it today, that is completely fine as well. You're always welcome to take more action than needed by our kind of minimum levels.
Fred Jackson, did the statute give us the benefit of a definition for infeasible?
I can read you the statutory language regarding this task. If you give me a second, I can pull it up.
It's not as straightforward as we would like it to be.
No. And I never would have thought about the PR issue and that crap.
So the statutory language regarding this, it's quite a long paragraph, so bear with me. Infeasible water management strategies include those water management strategies where proposed sponsors have not taken affirmative vote or other action to make expenditures necessary to construct or file applications for permits required in connection with the implementation of the water management strategy on a schedule in order for the water management strategy to be completed by the time the water management strategy is needed to address drought in the plan. And I can drop that language into the chat on the Teams meeting as well.
I understand it. Well, I'll just reserve any other thoughts because I don't know how many more times we can beat on this and if it's not necessary to actually take a vote on something, then perhaps we shouldn't.
Was that a motion to table this particular item till we see it in the technical memorandum?
No, I'm going to defer to smarter people than I am.
Well, that ain't me.
I'm thinking out loud with all of you.
Do our consultants think we need to take any action on this right now as of this?
It
these
sounds like
discussions?
not, and the reason why we had this as an action was because we were under the assumption that the process for this needed to be approved before we actually do the evaluation, but it sounds like that is not the case. So if that is not the case, then we are fine to present the official findings of this for approval as part of the technical memorandum meeting.
Well, this is Kelly, but then it kind of brings up the question, do we need to approve the methodology? Because it's going to be used, there's going to be a methodology used.
Yeah. That part is entirely up to you.
So I would defer to others in the planning, on the planning group. Scott, you're into this.
Technical
deep.
committee,
David Montaigne, you're into it deep as well.
Have the technical committee delve into it a little bit, maybe? Come back, because we don't need to approve it. We
Today.
can approve it at some time in the future. We have the ability to look into it a little bit further, and it sounds like a technical committee kind of an issue.
I would be in favor of that.
So you presented, you did a screening, you presented your findings, and that there was nothing infeasible was what your findings came to today. So I think we can take that as the presentation of the infeasible options and move forward with the other agenda items. We can certainly circle back and look at those things in technical committee if we need to deeper.
Correct.
Yes,
Okay.
you are in a position where you've presented your results of your infeasible water management strategies evaluation. So you can move forward with presenting your proposed methodology for the feasible water management strategies development and vote to approve on that.
Correct.
Does that help everyone?
Yes.
Well, to take some words from Kelly, I think we beat this horse to death.
Dead horse to death.
Dead horse to death. We've got the presentation on the results. Yep. So I don't think we need to take any action on this item at this time then, so we can move on to the next item.
Okay. So I'm gonna go lightly on this one. There's no action on this one. It's just if for some reason something came up as infeasible, then you would need to amend the 2021 plan to remove that, revise it to make it infeasible, and or incorporate a new one, especially if removing one had left a shortfall in the supply options. And those amendments would be due June 4th, 2024.
I just have to say, I appreciate the healthy debate and deliberation.
Well,
I appreciate that y'all do it so diplomatically. That's a testament to your planning group.
We have a very engaged team. I'm thankful. Okay, barring no other discussion on that, we're going to move forward on the hydrologic variance request. So I'm going to hand this one over to Jordan. Maybe it's on a delay, sorry.
So as part of the surface water supply analysis for regional water planning, the Water Development Board requires us to use the TCEQ water availability model, Run 3, which is the full appropriation model. This assumes first and right is the first in time, and that all water rights are fully used to their permitted limits. And if we need to make any modifications or adjustments to these base WAM Run 3 models, we have to request a hydrologic variance. And Water Development Board Online had a checklist that we had to go through. The two checklists that we are submitting to the group, and if we have received approval today, submitting to Water Development Board, are in the packet online. Those are for the Sabine and Neches basins. Overall in Region I, there's 4 major river basins. There's the Neches River Basin, the Sabine River Basin, the Trinity River Basin, and the Neches Trinity Coastal Basin, as shown on this map. And so in terms of our recommended hydrologic variances or lack thereof, our recommendations correspond to what we've done in previous planning cycles with some slight modifications. So we propose to adopt the current WAM Run 3 by TCEQ for the Neches Trinity Coastal Basin. And for the Trinity Basin, we propose to adopt the updated Trinity WAM that's going to be run by Region C. The Trinity is primarily in Region C. It's a very complex model, and they're updating that on their end. And traditionally, we've just adopted what they have on our end. And then for the Sabine and Neches basins, we've historically made some modifications and call it the Region I WAM. Some of those modifications include modifications to capture some operational considerations to get firm yields for regional water planning purposes, or to reflect operational considerations that are more realistic as opposed to what's in the TCEQ WAMs. And then we also update the area capacity curves to incorporate sedimentation. So we're projecting out supplies out to the 2080 decade, so we factor in sedimentation into the curves to project out what the firm yields would be over time. If you want more details on some of the more specific modifications we're going to make, those are detailed in the hydrologic variance checklist, but overall the variances we're requesting are very similar to what we've proposed in previous planning cycles. I guess one thing to note, the Neches WAM was recently updated in 2021. Some of the modifications that they made, or updates they made to the 2021 WAM, captured what we had previously modified as part of our Region I modeling efforts. So we're going to retain what they did in addition to what we've previously done.
My first question would be to the River Authority folks who probably rely on these models more than anybody. Any questions, comments, concerns with what Jordan just presented and affirming those variances? Nobody, nothing? Oh. Well, then I would entertain a motion to approve those hydrological variances for the surface water supplies as presented. Anybody?
Motion to approve.
I'll second. Terry.
Kelly Holcomb and Terry Stelling. Comments, questions, concerns? Not hearing any. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Cool, moving along.
And so for the next item, kind of going back to the flow chart earlier, we're tasked with presenting the process to identify and evaluate water management strategies for the 6th cycle of water planning. And so the Texas Administrative Code requires us to hold a public meeting to receive input on this process and document that process. Today is that meeting. Overall, our process for identifying and evaluating water management strategies is very similar to the process used in the 2021 Regional Water Plan. And so this just shows a flow chart of the process. So first, which we're currently working on, is we're identifying needs for each of the water user groups in Region I. So we compare the available supplies historically versus the projected demands to identify any needs for entities. The next step in the process is to review any recommended strategies from the 2021 Regional Water Plan or other strategies that were included, and determine if any changes are needed to those strategies. And a big part of that effort is coordinating with those water user groups and major water providers to receive input to see if their strategies are still things that they're working on, have been implemented, or if they have any modifications or would like to include any other strategies. And based off these reviews and coordination with these sponsors, we'll verify these recommendations for approval to the Regional Water Planning Group, and then document this process in the 2026 Regional Water Plan. And so in the Texas Administrative Code and in the Water Development Board guidance, there's a list of 24 different types of strategies that we can evaluate and potentially identify as feasible. General categories include conservation and drought management strategies, reuse strategies, transfers of existing supplies, developing new supplies, groundwater, surface water reuse, or others, as well as other types identified in the guidance. That list again is in the Water Development Board guidance if you're interested in looking at it, but these are just the general categories they're capturing. And overall, historically, Region I's kind of covered all of these categories So there's a number of different categories that have been recommended in previous cycles and we have identified as potentially feasible. And I think that those will also apply this round of planning.
All 24 or all of the ones that were listed up there?
I'd say, I guess 20 of the 24 are generally applicable. Up here, we show some that are listed in the 24 that historically have not really been considered as part of the regional water planning process. So that includes things like brush control, precipitation enhancement, canceling water rights, or rainwater harvesting on a large scale. But otherwise, the other 20 are generally types of strategies that we've considered potentially feasible. And once we start going into looking at old plans and coordinating with sponsors, we can kind of start to narrow those down. But at least the initial step of identifying them as potentially feasible, that's our screening process. And so these are just some, based off previous planning cycles, some constraints we've put on strategies that are identified as potentially feasible in the regional water plans. So those are a list of criteria there. So the strategies must have an identifiable sponsor or authority. They must consider the end use of that water. They must have a firm supply during the drought of record to provide a reasonable percentage of the projected needs. And because ultimately that's what we're planning for, is the water supply during those drought of record conditions. That's where our modeling basis is. The strategies must meet existing regulations and use proven technology. They must be implementable and also be appropriate for the regional water plans. In terms of the evaluation process for the planning group, for surface water supplies in particular, we're going to use the TCEQ approved WAM, which we had talked about earlier, as part of the hydrologic variance request, which considers environmental flows. For groundwater, we'll use approved model available groundwater and desired future conditions for specific groundwater or specific aquifers that have been vetted and approved by GMAs and GCDs. And overall, we'd like to provide an equitable and consistent comparison between strategies, which we'll kind of go and talk about a little more in the next slide of how we're going to do that in terms of evaluation criteria. And we also want to provide a quantitative component for each water management strategy. So we want to report on the potential quality or quantity those could provide, their cost, and the reliability of those supplies from those projects. And then these are some of the evaluation criteria that we will consider and document in the regional water plan. So we'll consider impacts on the water resources, threats to ag or natural resources, interbasin transfers, impacts on either third-party social or economics, impacts on water quality parameters or environmental parameters, consider existing pipelines and other conveyance infrastructure and other relevant issues to particular strategies as necessary.
Are there any significant changes from the last cycle with this methodology?
No, it's very comparable to last plan, no significant changes. So I guess based off of that matrix earlier, we don't necessarily have to get approval, but I know previous planning cycles, I believe we've gotten approval from the planning group to move forward with this process.
Anybody have any comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve this.
I make a motion to approve the process to identify and evaluate water management strategies as noted.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Monty Shank, thank you. Last opportunity for comments or questions. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, we got another one to pass. Thank you, Jordan.
Okay, next up, notice to proceed request for task 5B. According to the board, the Regional Water Planning Group needs to hold a public meeting to approve region-specific task 5B scope of work before the technical consultant is allowed to proceed with any of that. During that meeting, they will authorize the consultant to work with the Texas Water Development Board on clarifications, as well as authorize the sponsor you guys to execute a subsequent contract amendment based on that. All regional water planning groups must approve the process for identifying potentially feasible strategies for the 2026 plans prior to action on the scope of work, which we have just done. So now we're on to this next spot online. As part of the meeting materials, we had developed a table using the Texas Water Development Board provided template for a portion of the strategies that we believe would be moving forward first on task 5B. It is not for the full amount or for the full scope. It is just for preliminary pieces to get moving on the ones that need to come first. So this is a list of some of the water management strategy categories that are currently on there: water conservation strategies, indirect non-potable reuse strategies, new major reservoir for Lake Columbia, surface water diversion, surface water yield enhancement, and then it includes the documentation and database entry into DB 27. So with that information, as well as the table that was presented on the meeting materials online for an initial portion of task 5B, would like to propose discussion and approval for the team to submit a notice to proceed request for task 5B, authorization for the consultant to work with Texas Water Development Board on clarifications, and then subsequently authorize the city of Nacogdoches to execute a subsequent contract amendment upon receiving contract scope amendment and notice to proceed from the Texas Water Development Board. As a reminder, the funds have already been received by the city. It is for the actual scope amendment portion. We are not authorized to actually proceed forward with any of this without the scope amendment and notice to proceed.
Do you need 3 separate motions, or can
I think you can do it all in one for those 3 bullets.
Do I hear anybody making that motion to accept that?
Motion to approve.
I got
Second.
Is that Rob Starr second?
Yes.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everybody. Next item.
Okay, you've successfully made it past all the actions and discussions. Thank you all. So looking ahead, so the next piece that we're going to be working on with all of these pieces is basically pulling together everything for the technical memorandum that will be due on March 4th of 2024. So that will include, basically this is just a list of some of the key requirements for the TM. I am not going to read through everything on here, but most of that includes the DB 27 data reports. So it's all the database entry, all the information will be included as appendices to the technical memorandum. It will document the process used to identify potentially feasible water management strategies that we went over and approved today. It will provide the list of potentially feasible water management strategies to date. It will summarize all of the hydrologic variance requests to date. It will have the methodology for calculating the anticipated sedimentation rate and revising the area capacity rating curve, table of details of hydrologic models used, documentation and methodologies for groundwater availabilities to date. So we will invite our groundwater sub as well to come and present as part of that meeting. Any of the regions inter-regional coordination efforts to date. It will have all of the infeasible strategies from the 2021 plan, so that way any amendments that may result from that would go into that. And then it will also include, back to the board, any electronic model files used in determining water availability. So there's a lot of pieces in there. A lot of it are just attachments and tables and lots of appendices. So a draft of that will come out. So looking at all of the information that has to go into that, I would like to propose possibly splitting, I know we had talked at the last meeting about maybe having a meeting in January or February. And in our discussions as a team, we want to propose possibly splitting that into 2 more manageable chunks, especially because we do like to get involved in our discussions here, to have kind of a preliminary findings and present out on some of the pieces earlier, and then have a second meeting prior to the deadline of the technical memorandum to present any final results, any additional revisions, and actually approve the technical memorandum at that second meeting. So we can discuss that now or at the very end as item 15, set next meeting date to consider having that as 2 separate meetings, and we can discuss at that time when you feel those would best be suited.
We should just bump it down to later.
Okay, so with that, that's all we have.
Cool.
Thank you all for bearing with us.
Done with item 12. That was quite the lengthy, and if the technical memorandum was anything near that length, I understand why you want to do 2 meetings. Next item, number 13, reports from other state agencies as necessary. Texas Texas Water Development Board, and I just lost your name, not Sarah, who's replacing
Michelle Foss.
Sorry, thank you.
Quite all right. Yeah, y'all are troopers. Just a couple of quick updates. Everybody likes free money, or almost free money. The contract amendments are in final legal review, and we expect those to be sent out for signature by the end of the month. We're looking at probably 3 to 4 weeks. So those will be coming to you very shortly. The revised Exhibit C is already posted online under the Planning Cycle 6 documents. For those that want a more detailed look at the final requirements and something for consideration in with the revisions to Exhibit C and the additional funding is rural outreach. As part of legislative efforts and the additional funding, they would like some of that money to go to enhancing rural participation in the regional water planning process. So I'm sure you and your consultants are already starting to put your heads together, trying to determine some means of encouraging more rural participation for your planning group.
Can we provide free beer? We've tried everything else over the past 20 years.
Fish fry.
Fish fry, yeah.
That would be the one thing.
Yeah. I know it can be a painful process, but definitely do try. We had the Regional Water Planning Group Chairs Call last Thursday. They received some updates on the contract amendments, a review of the infeasible water management strategies evaluations, the upcoming board items, and the Interregional Planning Council. Next Interregional Planning Council meeting, as Kelly Holcomb mentioned previously, is on November 30th. They will be reviewing responses to the last round policy recommendations, and I would certainly encourage some involvement in this next round for policy recommendations. The board does take those extremely seriously, and we want to make this process better for everyone. Last but not least, we do have a new educational one-pager that is on the educational materials part of our website, and that is on uncertainty in water planning. So that will help with potentially unmet needs, and addressing times where we may or may not have a new drought of record type condition, to make sure that we are making sure that our municipalities, our businesses, our families are adequately taken care of. And that's all I've got.
Thank you very much. Next, Texas Parks and Wildlife, Mr. Stephen Lang.
Yes, good afternoon again, and it is afternoon. I'd like to preface my report by saying it may be infeasible to make your scheduled lunch hour. That doesn't mean we're going to cancel lunch. That just means we're deferring lunch to a later time. Does that kind of sum it up? Because that's kind of what I gathered. I've always been told that the Parks and Wildlife presentation is part of the one that should be fun and lots of good stuff to report, and I apologize for being remiss from this group for a little while, but we've had a lot of changes with Parks and Wildlife. So earlier in 2023, Dr. David Yoskowitz became our new executive director, taking over after Carter Smith for 15 years. Dr. Y comes to us from the Hart Institute on the coast in Corpus Christi at the Texas A&M University. He has an accounting and financial background, so he's not a traditional natural resource specialist, but he does have an emphasis in environmental, social justice, and other economic programs that benefit the environment. Mr. Craig Bonds is now our new Chief Operations Officer, took over after Clayton Wolf. He's our former division director for the Inland Fisheries Division. He actually started his career in Tyler at the district office as a district biologist, and Palestine was one of his lakes when he started back in 1998. Miss Allison Winnie is our new Chief of Staff. She's our legislative and partner liaison. That is going to primarily be working with the legislators and NGOs that actually benefit and support Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. We as a division have reorganized. I'm the regional director for the Wildlife Division in Tyler. We used to have 4 regions and 8 districts. We now have 5 regions and 11 districts. We're in the process of hiring 5 new district leaders. We just hired a new regional director in LaGrange, David Forrester. We have also split one of our programs in Austin. Miss Laura Zebehazy is now the new program director for the Ecological and Environmental Planning branch. So she's the one that actually is going to be doing Section 6, Section 7 reviews of mitigation, 404, and other type of environmental permitting processes with the department for our division. So she'll be a new contact for project review. And then Daniel Price, who is my designated alternate to this group, he is now the new Piney Woods Ecosystem Project Leader, started in April of this year. He's housed at the Alazan Bayou Wildlife Management Area in Nacogdoches and covers most of our WMAs and the National Forest units that are here in Region I. Then at the political level, Mr. Jeff Hildebrand, a former commissioner, has now been elected as chairman. Appointed by Governor Abbott. Chairman Applin has stepped down, and then Leslie Boggett has been assigned to replace Hildebrand as chair, as a commissioner. Both of them are from the Houston area and do reside within this planning region. Parks and Wildlife received a very good budget apportionment from the 88th legislative session. We also have record PR receipts that are coming in for both fish and wildlife management. So we're actually in a very good position operation-wise and program-wise. We also received a $10 million allocation from our migratory stamp fund from the legislature for both land acquisition and other management projects, including habitat delivery on private lands that will help improve wetland waterfowl management and riparian enhancements on private lands. We also have from the legislature the Park Centennial Proposition 14, which is a constitutional amendment providing for the creation of the Centennial Park Conservation Fund to be used for the creation and improvement of state parks. If passed, this would set aside $1 billion of state money to be put into an endowment perpetuity to actually provide interest on that money, the delta, to be able to purchase new parks, construct and design new parks, and actually do deferred maintenance on all existing parks. So this would be a big uplift to the agency if this does pass in helping support our State Parks Division in celebration of its 100th year anniversary. As a region and in this area, we do support what's called the Conservation Delivery Network. That is a consortium of both state and federal NGO entities, including people like Jenny Sanders and the Longleaf Alliance and Texas Longleaf Team, to actually be a pass-through for monies to private landowners to do healthy forest, healthy soil, and healthy water habitat improvements on their property. And those entities as well, because they do depend on some federal cost share funding, that we now have an added match for that. We hope to be able to deliver more habitat work within the coming biennium. Also, too, that may be of interest, Tom Hagar, who is in our fisheries division, that was a water planner for years, aquatic biologist. He retired in August. Cindy Loeffler, remember, she retired a couple years back. So we're having a lot of turnover even internally within our own agency. Is about 50% of some divisions, 38% of my division are all eligible to retire. And there's a lot of people that have decided to move on. We all can't work as long as Monty has. And so some have decided to kind of to move forward in their retirement careers. And I guess last but not least, I brought some party favors or propaganda or peace offerings, however you want to look at it. So these are pretty hard to get. If you go buy your hunting and fishing license at a Parks and Wildlife office, you will get one of these. But if you go to Academy or Walmart, you will not. So I brought some of those today if anybody wants to take them. I also brought the Pocket Outdoor Annual that'll fold up and fit next to your hunting and fishing license in your wallet. And I also brought a new public hunting brochure for the state as well. One of my projects that I've been working on that's been of great benefit. So myself and my regional employees have been working with the North Texas Municipal Water District and the Upper Trinity Regional Water District on Lake Ralph Hall and Lake Bodark and providing recreational access and helping to manage public use on those reservoirs as they come online. And it's been a pleasure working with both of those entities, and look forward that if we have any new or additional reservoir water projects in the future that have recreational public use benefits, that we'll be able to do the same. So thank you, and I'll entertain any questions if there are any.
Any questions?
I will provide this in a written summary so that y'all can include it in the minute notes.
Thank you, sir. Texas Department of Agriculture, Manuel.
Hello, greetings from the Texas Department of Agriculture. I just have two announcements, and they're more for programs if anybody's interested in getting into agricultural production. The first program is our Young Farmer Grant is currently open. This is a grant program that's available to anyone that's interested in creating or expanding a current agricultural operation. The grant the amount of the grant is $20,000. It's a matching grant, so it's a reimbursement program, and it's also helping to just create a brand new farming operation or currently expanding on an operation it's in production right now. It's available only to applicants between the ages of 18 and 46. That's what we are trying to get the younger generation involved in agriculture and continue those farming operations. The deadline to apply is coming up soon. It's October 11th. It has been open for about a month, but the deadline to apply is October 11th. So creating some type of business plan, letting us know what you're wanting to do with that operation is part of the application. So you can go to our website or just Google Young Farmer Grant, Texas Department of Agriculture, and the application will come up. The second announcement is another program, but this one's offered through Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. It's called the Battleground to Breaking Ground program. This one is offered to veterans and active duty military that are wanting to get into agricultural production. So if you know of anyone that fits that criteria, this is basically to transition veterans or active duty military into farming and trying to get them involved into, agricultural production. The deadline for that one is December 8th. But this program offers online business planning courses, hands-on training in agricultural production. It's available in 3 phases, so phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. It provides workshops and just providing them education and learning more about agricultural production. And you can also do a search on that. It's called Battleground to Breaking Ground, or you can contact me for any of those programs, and I can offer more information. And that's it for me.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Texas Soil and Water Conservation, Trey, you out there? No? Groundwater management areas, Mr. McFarland.
Groundwater Management Area 11 has nothing new to report this time.
GMA 14 is still working with the Water Development Board to best tweak the newly revised Gulf Coast model that, to make it work better for the entire GMA 14 area. We have a meeting scheduled for the 26th in Brenham if anybody's interested. And that's all I have. General discussion, anybody need to chime in on anything? Thank you for not. Item 15, meeting dates. We're looking at 2. Can we get them into next year, I hope? Will they both wait that long, or do we need to get one before the end of the year and then?
Especially because
Yes.
December is kind of hard.
Yeah, December is gonna be squirrely anyway. Yes, so I think we could probably do one in January, one in February. The one in February, because that will be the approval of the technical memorandum, that one will require the 14-day period before that, so we just need to make sure that we have enough time for that.
What's the due date in March?
March 4th,
March 4th, so we need to leave.
so maybe like middle of the month for
Yes.
both of them.
an
Not
emergency
wait till the
date.
third week like we normally do, maybe the second week.
Second Wednesday in February is Valentine's Day.
Ooh, let's get together for that.
Calendar, does anybody have a calendar? You suggesting any dates? You got any dates that are open for you that you're recommending?
It's basically 2 weeks. A little less than 2 weeks.
Where the heck's my dang, there it is. October, November, December. Somewhere.
Well, we just say 21st or 14th.
Okay, we've got a lot of folks that are online that I've had to round up, and I appreciate you guys taking the effort. I know it's a lot of work to take out of your days, especially in a long meeting like this, so this is the time to chime up. Wednesdays typically seem to work for most people. I think we've almost always had them on Wednesdays. So unless somebody's got some major issues with that, why don't we shoot for January 17th tentatively, and the 17th. That would give us enough time maybe to go as early as February 7th, and then give us a breather if something should hiccup and we have to reschedule it. Does that sound good to everybody? Comments?
I make a motion to approve those dates.
Do you need to check them first?
Probably, yes.
If room has conflict.
Take the Wednesdays for both January and February.
I gotta be at national meetings on Saturday, that's the day before the start of the semester.
All day kind of thing?
So Bridget, I've got a question on the technical memorandum. Are you gonna do preliminary on the first meeting for the entire memorandum and then final? Or are you gonna do half of the technical memorandum on the first meeting and the second half?
I am not sure on that one.
I would think that the schedule would depend on how you organize that. You may want more time between the first meeting and the second meeting.
Well, that's what I'm questioning, because if we put them 3 weeks apart and we have to have a 2-week posting, that gives us 1 week to turn anything around.
Okay.
So I would think early January and late February.
That would probably be preferred.
January 10 and
Last Wednesday in February.
if there's a hiccup and we don't have a quorum, I've come close to having that issue once myself on a deadline for the GMAs.
Yeah.
So I always leave myself that 2-week space, so the 14th. That way if something happened, we can still have it there and get it in.
Okay, John?
So
Good.
how about?
Good news, bad news?
It's okay, because we're changing the
Okay.
dates. The
Okay.
10th, January 10,
Oh, let me go check, because I didn't ask that one.
and then February 14.
Okay, we can't do any Wednesdays in February. That's the bad news. They've got tax help every Wednesday from 8:30 to 1. In February.
Okay. Did you want to go check the 10th for us?
I'll check the 10th, but you want to do Tuesday or Thursday in February?
Anybody have preference on Tuesdays or Thursdays?
Early March, is that too late?
We've got the 4th to the
Tuesdays,
4th,
not
so that's
Thursday.
pushing it.
March 4th is due.
Like I said, March.
Prefer Tuesday, not Thursday.
Okay, so for the folks who are online, I had some comments here that say people are preferring Tuesday over Thursday. Does that kind of work, generally speaking, out there? Tuesdays for February meeting?
Okay, let me go check.
Okay, she's gonna
Around 7th or 14th?
check all, you might as well check all 4 weeks.
We've got the 20th or 27th.
I would prefer to leave a 2-week. So if something happens to where, we can't have a meeting, we can reschedule, and because of the 14-day notification. I can't believe we're waiting to get.
Okay, January 10th is a go. And Tuesday is the only one that's not available is the 13th, so.
Got to be at a board meeting by 6, I can't.
And the 4th is on a Monday, so that wouldn't leave us 2 weeks of lead time.
Is it 2 weeks from the March
No,
4th?
it's 2 weeks before the meeting.
Before the
No, you don't have
meeting.
to have it 2 weeks before the TM. It just depends on how many comments y'all are gonna have.
So we can do the 20th?
You could do the 20th.
If you do the 20th, the notice will have to go out on February the 6th.
Yeah,
Okay,
which is
again,
fine.
the one thing that I always plan for is a hiccup. So if we had the meeting, scheduled a meeting on the 20th and we got here and a quorum did not occur, if we had a technical issue and a quorum didn't occur, we wouldn't have 2 weeks to repost a meeting. So how about the 15th?
That's a Thursday.
That's a Thursday.
They just said not to do Thursday.
Pardon?
Kelly just said no Thursday.
I have a problem with that, but I may be able to get somebody to stand in and fill in for me in court.
Let's start with what do we have available in February and work our way backwards from there.
All Tuesdays except the 13th.
No Wednesdays, no Thursdays,
No
Fridays,
Wednesdays.
No Mondays.
No, I didn't ask Mondays and Thursdays.
Can we do a Monday?
Anybody absolutely opposed to a Monday, the 12th maybe?
Is the building open on Wednesday?
Lincoln's birthday.
You want to check the 12th for us, Cheryl?
12th, check the 12th of February?
Please. It's a holiday. Is that matter? Lincoln's birthday? It's not President's Day. Okay. It's the following Monday.
Not for us either. Hey, I can present this before, it doesn't matter.
Because we don't have to post materials until.
I can't wait to work next Monday. It's gonna be quiet. I can nobody around to bother me. I plan on going to the office. I'm not even gonna work from home. I'm going into the office on the holidays specifically to get caught up.
Mondays are off. Mondays and Wednesdays are doing the tax help, so we're down to Tuesday and Thursday. Thursday in February, all the Thursdays are available. Yes. Oh yeah, that was real easy. Okay, Thursday, February 15th, and January 10th is a Wednesday.
Conflict on 15? I got a class, but I don't care. It'll break my heart.
Me, I don't care. They don't care.
Okay, I had the mic off. Did everybody catch that? We're gonna do the 10th, January 10 and February 15. So
10 a.m. for both?
10 a.m.
For both, yes.
Does 10 work?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Otherwise, unless somebody wants to pipe in, I really need to shut this meeting down so I can go take care of some business, quite literally. 12:26, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you. Appreciate
Do
everybody.
you know what time we logged?